Okay, so I'm not going to start over. So I was sharing about my personal investigation and what brought me to create Learning with Nature, um, but I'd forgotten to record. So now that we're recording, I'm going to continue. So I investigated lots of different ways that education, and particularly Waldorf education, was being brought to children and families throughout the country. And I saw a lot of beauty, and I saw a lot of challenges. And I really saw a lot of the challenge in this time, in this current time period. We are really going through it as a human species and as the planet Earth, right? There's um, so many challenges across every front of our life. And so when we look at education, we see obviously that there are many, many challenges in the education system, even in an alternative education system. And a lot of what was trying to be brought through Waldorf was also falling short in a lot of ways based on what I saw. And I really saw that it was falling short because a lot of what needed to happen in the home life wasn't happening in the home life. And we had forgotten a lot of ways to bring rhythms and a life giving education to children instead of bringing this information dumping or content heavy approach. It was there was not so much life. So it really prompted me to more deeply investigate this current time period and how to create an approach that is rooted in connection, rhythm, and soul, which is the essence of Waldorf education. So I'm just going to dive in now to my presentation. And I have here Learning with Nature is much more than a curriculum. I I think a lot of times, even in Waldorf education, it can be very challenging because there's a specific format that is brought. And unless it's really living in each teacher, in each guide, it becomes again an information dump rather than this life giving, weaving, um, moving curriculum. So, this learning with nature approach is a living journey. It's a life giving education that really seeks to honor the sacred unfolding of each and every child. So we look at the whole child, the whole picture, and also the not the teacher parent partnership as well as the parent child partnership. And this is a soul led education, which means it's a deep inquiry and a contemplation and a meditation of our children and how to support them in the now in fulfilling their unique purpose, not only in the now, but throughout their whole life. And so the platform that I've created is built on four guiding pillars. And these pillars are Waldorf education, of course, and the sacred rhythms, the healthy rhythms, and nature connection that really are the backbone of Waldorf education. As well, independent development planning with parents and project based learning, not only in a classroom, but also in home, not independent work as well as group work. And the final pillar is an archetypal understanding using human design, gene keys, and the Hippocrates temperaments, which is what Steiner brought with Waldorf education. And we'll talk about all of these through this presentation. So, first, uh, an introduction to Waldorf. So, Rudolf Steiner is he brought Waldorf education to the world. And when he did, in the early or the late 1800s, early 1900s, he also brought a number of other beautiful methodologies in for movement. Like he has Boatmer gymnastics, which is um, a movement principles based on his work, eurythmy. He brought so many different aspects that were really put into Waldorf education to support each child and the development stage that they're in. According to Steiner, there are three major developmental stages in a child's life from 0 to 21. So, from 0 to 7 is the first stage, and it is all about building the will forces of a child. The second 7 years is from ages 7 to 14, and this is really building the feeling life of a child. And then from ages 14 to 21, this is more the thinking realm of the child, the cognition. So within each of these three stages, there are at least three stages within that 7 year frame. And so everything from Waldorf education, everything that is in Waldorf is based on these developmental stages in a child's life. And personally, I was when I was introduced in 2004 to Waldorf, I I was living I went to live at an ashram in California, and I stayed there just for a month. And after I spent some time there and did a teacher training, I prayed and asked, what next? And I heard Waldorf. And I went to investigate and landed in a school. But like I said, I had to cut it short and I moved back to Orlando and I ended up opening a yoga studio because I had already been um, exploring yoga for a while and I loved it. And I wanted to bring mindfulness, meditation, and yoga and teach the ways of the body to people. And so I shared that in Orlando. And as I began my yoga, my Shine On Yoga journey, I I started a teacher training, and I began to base the teacher training on the chakras, which are energy centers. And I'm not going to get into that full story, but basically, as I started to offer these yoga teacher trainings based on the chakras, what I realized is that there are these stages of development, and all ancient wisdom traditions look at these stages of development or consciousness through a person's life, through a human being's life. And as I realized that, wow, Rudolf Steiner and his Waldorf education is really this initiation through these stages of consciousness, which are directly correlated to each child's developmental stages from 0 to 21. And I have more insights to share about that later, but just to give a little bit more about that, it really struck me that this yoga practice that I was teaching and sharing and discovering within my own self, and a lot of adults having very amazing experiences, was directly correlated to these to our stages of development as children. And if we can, in fact, bring what I'm about to share with you in the next several slides, if we can bring this to children in these ages from their early childhood, then we can really support them in their uniqueness right from the start. Where I don't know about all of you that are on this call, but for me, I had to do a lot of work to deprogram myself, to release a lot of trauma, to like, I didn't have the I didn't have the healthy rhythms. I didn't understand the breath. I didn't have guides or teachers who helped me to navigate between the intellect and the body. So I find that this work is the most important work that we can do, not only for ourselves, because I think all of Waldorf education also can be for adults, but for our children to be able to hold this space, because this learning is structured around rhythm. It's structured through the breath, and it creates balance, and it helps our senses. It supports things like our digestion. And these are keys to living a healthy, coherent life. And we need more than ever to be able to find this wellness in this world. And it is not easy. So, well, in Waldorf, we are always looking at the head, the heart, and the hands. And learning comes because we synthesize all of these together. And this quote here from Steiner: one can ascend to a higher development only by bringing rhythm and repetition into one's life. Rhythm holds sway in all nature. Another quote by Steiner: our highest endeavor must be to develop free human beings who are of themselves able to impart purpose and direction to their lives. So, according to Steiner, we have a threefold body composed of a nervous system, a rhythmic system, and a system of movement and metabolism. Steiner saw rhythm as a foundation for health, for learning, and for development. Rhythm helps us all, but especially children, to regulate their self emotionally and to find joy in learning. Everything that we bring from a in a Waldorf classroom is all to balance this in and out breath. So when we think of an in breath, we're thinking about something that brings the focus in. And when we think of an exhale, it's how can we take what we've just focused on and express it. So it could be through movement, a project, watercolor painting, but it's this constant dynamic of breathing that we are working with. Rhythm is said to, of course, enhance memory and integration through repetition, and it supports long-term well-being and a love of learning. So in a Waldorf classroom, every morning there is a very similar flow to the beginning of the day. And this predictability really helps the children to relax into the space, into the day, especially if the teacher, the guide, the parent is able to find something of meaning, something living within that flow. Because If we're doing the same thing every day as adults, we have to be cultivating that sense of wonder within ourselves because otherwise we can show up and just be doing a rhythm, but not be putting our energy, our zest for life, our passion into it. So we tend to have a predictable flow because it supports the children. They know what is expected of them. And we usually start the day, like I just started our meeting, with a verse, some way that connects us to the present moment, but also leaves us perhaps with a question or in a state of wonder or some way to connect to something bigger than ourselves. And the morning time usually is 1 to 2 hours of a very specific focus. As you can see here, it says mornings are core academics. But even when we're looking at academics, it's a constant balance between a focus or an in breath and an out breath of bringing it into the body in some way, because it's really all about the body. Um, and that just really depends how much time that we're focused on an academic versus a movement or artistic creation. It all depends on the age and stage of the child. And so, even in the mornings, there's this movement between the in and out breath. In the afternoons, typically we have more of an out breath, and it makes sense, especially because in the early morning, we tend to be able to, not everybody, and some people are actually have a different attunement than this. And as I've investigated human design, which we'll talk about at the end of this presentation, I have really learned that we can speak maybe in general, but there are always some people who don't have the same experience. But typically, the mornings, the sun rises, there's a lot of energy, we're able to focus and accomplish things. And in the afternoons, as we get maybe more food and we have worked in the morning and created things, by the afternoon, there's even more of a desire to have that exhale, that out breath. And all throughout the day, we have movement that is brought. And especially in the younger ages, it's mostly you're moving. Even when you're sharing a lesson, it might be through movement. Um, Steiner emphasizes this over and over, and I mentioned in the beginning this word eurythmy. And this is, when Rudolf Steiner was in his creation mode of all of these different aspects of the life of a human being and the genius of a human being, he had many people knocking on his door saying, "Can you create something for this? Can you create something for that?" And so a lot of things were birthed from Steiner's body of work through other people. Eurythmy is one of those things, and it is expressive movement linked to music and speech. It's a beautiful form. It's a conscious movement practice, much like, maybe not like yoga, but I find a lot of consciousness in my yoga practice. Um, I've never actually practiced yoga with speech exercises, but eurythmy isn't moving your body into yoga poses, but it's moving the body in through space. And it can be alone, like individually together, or you can also do forms together and work together. It's a beautiful movement. Um, Handwork, artwork, woodwork, these are all will building and very grounding. And Everything that is in Waldorf is learning through the whole body. So when we think about bringing things to our children, I work with a lot of parents, and what I mostly see we kind of miss the mark on is how we ask a lot of our children to sit and do and focus, but we forget that it has to be a fully embodied experience. So I think I've already shared a lot of this. It supports rhythm, support memory, confidence. It helps lower anxiety. When you have that healthy rhythm, you can relax into it, and it actually activates and expands your ability to learn. And so these things all continue to help support the child's will life and their feeling life. And remember, ages 0 to 7 is when the will is really developing, and according to Steiner, and the feeling life is 7 to 14. Waldorf education is supposed to be a living education. What can happen, even in Waldorf, I see, is this um, the teachers or the guides not finding the stories within their own self. And then there's not this real relatable experience, right? Because what's alive in us is going to be transferred to our children. So we want to make sure that we are finding a way every day to connect with life giving realities. And that's not so easy as an adult in this world. I think one of my greatest teachers, a senior Waldorf teacher, came and gave me some good advice when I was taking my first grade class. And he said, every day cultivate awe and devotion. And the way that I do that is through nature, being in nature, sitting outside in the morning, in the evening, now that it's summer and it's so hot. um, but every day, everybody has their own way, dancing, creating, being able to really find that um, the right brain, the balance of both the right and the left um, hemispheres of the brain, so that everything that we're doing is infused with life giving energy. Because there has to be a breath, right? A breath and this flow between focus and creativity, or and structure, stability, flexibility, and being able to move between these and in these. And when we do, we are really able to connect children to the mysteries and the magic of nature and of relationship, to themselves, their self relationship that forms as they grow, and the relationship to others and community, and a community of all ages and all stages. So, next week, we'll start with looking at healthy Waldorf healthy rhythms, and then I'm going to discuss more about the next two slides. This one is the 3-day learning cycle. So, one thing that I find is so beneficial about Waldorf education, when done correctly, it is this. It's a process. So on day one, we would bring some kind of story to the children, or some lesson, something we want to teach them. And we know that stories they bring are like great for children. They learn so much through a story. So we bring them this new content through a story that we personally have meaning, because we can't bring a story if we don't have a connection to it. We can, but it's not going to be as impactful, right? So on that day one, we bring something new through a format that's alive, through a story. And then we let it be, we let it rest. And then day two, we come back and we say, okay, what do we remember about the story? And we might ask some engaging questions that we have considered, like, what do we want to bring from that story? And then we might bring it into movement, sometimes maybe a play. Like children love to do plays, so I often like to act out different parts of a story. We might bring it through a drawing, a painting, a some kind of creation. And then the next day, we bring it more into a writing, something like, okay, let's write about that story. And in Waldorf education, a lot of times you'll see these beautiful chalkboard drawings and beautiful writings that the teacher has done, and that's all very fine and good and could be an option. But there's another option, which is to ask the child, what do you remember? We're going to write about this story, three sentences, a paragraph. What do you remember? What do you want to write? And maybe even just listening to what they think and helping them write it down, unless they already are writing, and then they can write their own thinking down. So it's a time of reflection, and we'll go into that more. But just to bring this to you now, this is a way that will help children to digest experiences, because if every day we're bringing new content and we're working with that content, Steiner says we're missing something. And he says that because he put a lot of emphasis on sleep and how during our sleep we have these other forces that are working in us. And um, probably many of us know that is true. I certainly do. It is so powerful to be intentional one day right before I sleep, or something I do, or ask a question, sleep on it, and see what comes the next day. And when you do that multiple days in a row, you can really have this living, meaningful experience that becomes embodied for the children, not just something that was implanted or shared with them, and then right away, like, what do you think? And then the next day, moving on to the next new thing, because it doesn't really allow for a full digestion. And if you're not fully digesting the experiences, then perhaps you're not fully embodying them either. So, just to finish this segment, we must teach children how to sleep and how to breathe. Okay. So, the second pillar of the Learning with Nature platform is, and they're not really in order. It's not one, two, three, four, even though that's how I have it in the slideshow. But it's independent development planning with parents. And this is more, why are we doing this? And for me, energy like there is a, I don't even know who said this, but it's just a well-known concept. Energy follows thought, right? And we know that from all the quantum physics work that we have been graced to learn about the last 20, 30 years in a big, big way. We know that what we think and who we are in our body is what we see in the world, our perceptions, right? So this pillar really is about collaborating with the parents and so really creating the space so children can thrive in the environment. So this is a time where in the beginning, before we even start to work for a school year, we have some kind of planning sessions that look at how is the child, where, how is the wellness of the child in all these different ways. We are more than just physical beings, right? We have all these dimensions, and we want to look at all of them and see what's going on, what's living in the child, what's living in the family. And the more that we can get clear on kind of what's going on and where do we want to go, the more we can truly create a experience that supports our goals, our desires, our intentions. So this aspect helps us to really anchor the year in something that's meaningful and that the teacher and the parent, or if you're just a parent homeschooling by yourself, that you can do. And the more that you can create a map of the year, and it doesn't mean that, right? Like it can be a fluid, dynamic, living map. So we begin with a child's profile. What do you see are their natural strengths? What are the challenges or sensitivities? How does the child learn? What are their natural rhythms? According to human design, there are some people who digest the best at night when the sun goes down. And that's very interesting. And I've given multiple readings with people who have this profile. And so we are all different. And I think that that's one of the beauties of the approach that I'm bringing is that we give space for that. Because I think in a lot of the educational systems, even Waldorf, some of the teachers or guides that I've witnessed, they're using it in a dogmatic way, a way that's like, oh, I need to do this, do this, do this. And there's a lot of beauty in it, but there's not space for everyone because we really are so different and unique. And so watching, witnessing, observing, how has your child naturally moved through time and space since they were young, since they were 1, 2 years old? We can look at their natural rhythms. It is a little tricky though, because we do live in a world that is not very well, right? There's a lot of chaos. In fact, one of a great astronomer, also an astrologer, her name is Dr. Bernadette Brady, and she says we're not in a cosmos, we're in a chaosmos. And so a lot of us have, are unwell, and that's the norm. And so even when we look at our children's early rhythms, um, we don't know, right? How is that from a place of wellness, or is it that they're presenting this way because of something that's not balanced, right? So we're going to look at all of those with human design, gene keys, and temperaments. But this is how we start to look in independent development planning, is looking at the child and what's going on with them. And then together we create a development plan. What is it that we want to, what is it that we see? And then what is it that we want to accomplish? What's the intention? And then from there we can start looking at, okay, let's create some goals. Let's create some rhythms to really support our goals and intentions. And then this isn't static, right? This is a life-giving education, so it's always unfolding. And that means that if at any point we see, wow, this is not working, what's going on here, right? It's a constant contemplative practice of seeing what's happening in the now and what support might need to be shifted or changed to support the child and the family. This aspect is inspired by Waldorf, but also when the pandemic happened and all kinds of things had to change in a lot of the educational um, realms out there, there was some really good resources and writings and articles and things that were being done by people all over the world. And that was really where I got the independent development planning from, was not Waldorf, but in Waldorf education, a part of it is that the teachers study and observe each child deeply. It's a practice that we have to be taking notes regularly, to reflect regularly, even, and we are guided to each night before we go to bed, before the children, like before bed time, 8 or 9 o'clock, we actually just see the child tucked in bed and pray for them, just support them and wish them a good sleep, and that they can relax. So in yoga, there's it's called yoga nidra, and nidra means sleep in Sanskrit. And I practiced that for many years and taught that for many years. And one of the common sayings is that even when people sleep, or many people are not sleeping, even when they're sleeping. And what they meant is that if you haven't released all of the tensions in your body, then you can't truly sleep. So, teaching people like a progressive relaxation where you tighten the body and then you relax and tighten another part of the body and relax and help through different polarities, and using the imagination, you can walk someone to more deeply learn and understand how to throw off the tensions. So Steiner emphasized the destiny path of the child, that it is important for us to be attuned through our meditations and our contemplations and listen to the soul of the children, because they share when we actually want to, when we lean in and we are quiet and we ask, a lot can be shared, um, that's not verbal. So um, all of this is to really support the children in their growth and in their freedom. And yeah, I'll leave that there. So the pillar number 3 is project-based learning. Learning by doing, the curiosity, creativity, collaboration. We all know this. Children learn best when they're engaged in meaningful hands-on work. I don't really know a toddler that doesn't want to be involved in everything that their parents are doing, right? We all want to be involved. And it's hard as a parent to let them be involved in all of the work around the home because we can do it faster. They make a mess. There's many reasons why it can be difficult, but it is of, I think, supreme importance to figure out a way to allow that. And and many of us have children that are not toddlers anymore, but it's the same. They really want to be doing meaningful hands-on work. And projects, of course, build real life skills, right? They make us think, plan. They help us in collaborating, as well as being resilient when something doesn't show up in the way that we want. I mean, even in Waldorf education, we use like everyone makes their own books. There are no books. It's you create your book. And that's a project, right? So really every day we're doing projects either independently or together. And it supports us so much in finding, I think that, and allowing that innate curiosity that is there when we're young to continue. Because when you see the beautiful work that you can create and produce, it makes you want to continue. You want to keep growing and sharing and showing, okay, I did a little bit more, a little bit better. I was able to overcome this challenge, I was able to think creatively. Um, so we blend, as I mentioned, independent and group projects. So we might bring a story one day, the next day bring it into some kind of movement or a play, and then maybe the next day create out of clay, or design a nature journal. Like I love to have the kids make their own journals. I've even made paper with the kids before because it's so meaningful when you have something that you've created and now you're going to write in that and you're going to make your own stories and your own pictures, or begin a garden, plant seeds, research how that goes, write about it, right? So the projects emerge from what we bring. We bring stories, themes, um, the magic and the mysteries, the challenges. We bring all kinds of things in our lessons, and then we work with it. We work with it independently and together. Um, The other thing that's interesting when you look at Waldorf education, so I mentioned it's this initiation or these stages of consciousness that go through each grade, which nowadays all all veils are removed. Like everything is available in the now, but we do need to still give a sequence to help them step one, step two, so that there really is this learning across the developmental stages, the consciousness stages. For example, in Waldorf, we form drawing is something that we do from a very young age, first grade, and we might draw a circle, um, we might draw different shapes or the infinity sign. We draw it. We use our hands and we'll draw it in the air. We'll draw it on our paper. Before we even draw it on the paper, we just get a feeling for it. We might walk it, like when we're teaching the ABCs and the one, two, threes. We do all of these things so that it's embodied. And this sets the stage for later geometry, right? So the form drawing it's a body geometry. Um, and the storytelling, when you can really live into the stories and find those pictures within ourselves and transmit those to the children, then the writing, their ability to read, to write, it just starts coming because they can see it, and then there's so much writing out there and books that they read and writing, copying things. And that starts to come. And it comes when it's a living picture. Um, yeah, gardening always as well, brought at a very young age. And then over time, we learn more and more about the plants. So finally, we have pillar 4, archetypal understanding, human design, gene keys, and temperament. So, and I have a couple quotes here from Steiner that I love. Where is the book in which the teacher can read about what teaching is? And he says, the children themselves are this book. We should not learn to teach out of any book other than the one lying open before us and consisting of the children themselves. So that to me is, we might have this great plan, this great idea, and that we come and we bring it to the children, and or we feel like, oh, this is actually not what's being asked for. You know, we need to listen. And listening, the art of listening is something that takes practice. Um, you can get an idea of human nature only when you can see the relationship of the individual human being to the whole cosmos. So, know thyself. Here we recognize the soul path of the child, that each child carries a unique design, a unique blueprint. And the amazingness of the technology today, the world today, is that we have these incredible systems. Human design and gene keys are one of them that I've been studying for about 8, 9 years now. And it has been life changing because it gives a map of each individual person. And the map shows their body's operating system and the mind's operating system. And according to human design, we must learn the body's operating system in order to, so the body, we're here to learn the body so that the mind can serve the other. We have really missed the mark in that way. Many, many, many people are struggling because they have forgotten the body. They forgot how to listen to the body's cues. And the body speaks, and the body, um, it holds traumas as well. We get stuck in points in time. And so these systems really help us to look at a person's body and guide them in understanding how to take care of their body so that they can use the mind um, in the best way possible and live correctly so that they are motivated correctly and that their perception is correct. And so these systems help us to understand how your aura or your energy operates. And there are quite big differences between, there's 4 main energy types and a subtype. So 5 energy types. And they really are very different in how they operate and what they need in order to help support them in living their life to the fullest experience possible. When we understand the body's cues, we can understand how to make correct decisions. And decision making is all the time, right? Even going to the bathroom, little things that the children have to decide to sit here or do this over here, right? Or be next to this person at the playground versus this person. Um, so we're making decisions all the time and learning our body's cues. And when we feel a yes or a no, is really important. It helps us to see the children's learning styles, learning needs, and then support them socially, emotionally, and all the ways that we need on the earth plane. Steiner, he taught that about the four temperaments, the Hippocrates temperaments: melancholy, sanguine, phlegmatic, and choleric. And he also used these to set up a classroom and how the classroom was designed and who sat next to who. And so this is really embedded in this Waldorf education, and looking at what is going on, what is this beautiful, unique soul presenting, and how can I support them in a full awareness of their body so that they can really free the mind to um, to do other things, to live life. So, human design is a synthesis of quantum biomechanics, Kabbalah, the I Ching, Vedic chakra system, and astrology. Here are some of the ways that it can support. It helps us to learn the body mind operating system, helps us to see when they're reacting versus responding, what's happening there. We can look at their intuition. We can look at what fears do they have. Guttural sounds. There are some types that tend to make a lot more guttural sounds than others, and we want to encourage those guttural sounds because it's how they connect to their body and how what informs them to make the right decisions, to make the decisions from their body. It helps us to see how they digest, what environments do they thrive in, how do they learn, and all of this is to honor them, honor their nature. Because if we don't really have an understanding or a picture, or we haven't cultivated the art of listening, and that spaciousness within ourselves, it can be very easy to live and operate within a shame, guilt, isolation, rejection program, fear-based program that can really oppress, repress, and suppress their uniqueness rather than allow it to thrive. All of that I pretty much said. So finally, education is a living tapestry, woven with intention, wonder, and the wisdom of the soul. And my vision is to create environments where children feel seen, supported, and nourished. And together we are co-creating a new model of education rooted in ancient wisdom, responsive to each child's blueprint, reconnected and reconnected with the earth and each other. Thank you. Thank you so much for being part of the evolution of life giving education and learning with nature. I'm going to stop share and come back in the Zoom room, and I'm going to stop the recording.